Well, hello everybody. This is Jon Croft with Culture Warfare with Jon Croft, and I am Jon Croft. And how's everybody tonight? Rebecca's here. How you doing, Rebecca?
Hi, Jon Croft. I'm doing great.
Uh,
How are you?
Doing good. It's 2025.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah.
Quarter of a century already past 2000. That's
Oh.
crazy. Yeah, yeah. So we've been married almost a quarter of a century.
Wow,
That's
that's
wild.
awesome.
Yeah, that's wild.
Congrats to us.
Yeah. Congrats. Yeah, so we've been having a pretty good week.
Yeah, everyone's healthy.
Yeah, nobody's sick this week that I know of. So, what kind of media experiences have you been having, Rebecca?
Well, thanks for asking.
You're welcome.
Um, last week when you were talking about Magnify,
Yeah.
and that was really cool, and that reminded me that we haven't really talked about Jonathan Ogden yet.
Mm-hmm.
Or Rivers and Robots, and he's a part of that group, Magnify, um, which is, how would you describe that? A ministry?
Yeah, I think it's like an arts ministry. So they minister to Christian artists, inspire Christian artists, and make art,
Yeah,
kind of like almost as like missionaries.
yeah,
So they go into communities and inspire and preach the gospel through artists and through art.
right. That's
That's pretty
awesome.
cool. Yeah.
So Jonathan Ogden is a part of that group, and he probably anyone watching this already knows about them, but in case you didn't, he started a group called Rivers and Robots. He's from England. They produce in Manchester, England, and I want to say, let's see, their second album came out 2012, and it's called Take Everything, and that's one we've been listening to a lot lately. And their music is just so good. It's basically it's worship music, but it's very indie, very folksy,
Yeah.
and I would maybe, if I could think of a secular band, like maybe Fleet Foxes, they sound a little bit like that, maybe.
Maybe a
Uh,
tiny bit Coldplay.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, with a little bit more of a dance vibe quite often.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is where the title Rivers and Robots comes from, is the rivers is the streams of living water
Mm-hmm.
that flow um, from the believers, and the robots are the electronic instruments. So
Ah.
they use a lot of keyboards and electronic things, but at the same time, it still manages to sound very folksy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so another good album of theirs, I'll just mention a couple because they have a lot. They have an album called Eternal Sun, which is really worth looking into. I believe that Jonathan Ogden designed the cover of that because he actually did go to school for graphic design.
Oh yeah, you were telling me about that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I think he does all the album covers. I'm not sure. But that one came out in 2016. It's got a track on there called The Fullness of God, which is taken, I would say, taken almost directly from the book of Colossians. It's just
Nice.
uh, amazing.
Yeah.
So inspiring, like just the kind of like it's really based in scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Like the lyrics are very scriptural, so you'll find yourself memorizing verses just from listening to their music.
Yeah.
2018, they did an amazing album called Discovery, which has one of our favorite songs on there called Satisfy,
Mm-hmm.
about how it's the Lord that satisfies us. Around 2016, he started doing work on his own, just as Jonathan Ogden. And during COVID, he started coming out with these worship sets, and that's when I
Yeah.
discovered him on the YouTubes, was just these really earnest, simple worship sets like, hey, COVID is happening,
Hmm.
everybody's locked down, let's just worship God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those were really amazing. I think a lot of people were drawn in, to a closer relationship with the Lord just from listening to things like that. And
Yeah. Trying to find music like that that's peaceful and calming and
yeah,
just really like new worship stuff.
yes, he did one around that time called Slow Down.
Yeah, that
I
was
mean,
good.
amazing song. Maybe a little more poppy than some of his other stuff, but just so
Hmm.
good. It's like the Lord leading you to slow down, to be
Yeah.
still in his presence and to think
Right.
about, to trust him with what's going on in the world. Their newest album, I'll just mention their newest album. It's called Take Me Back, or it's Jonathan's newest album.
Right.
Um, it's called Take Me Back. It's really good as well. But yeah, lots of themes of devotion to the Lord, longing for his return, and a lot of revelation, like a lot of,
Stuff from
you
the
know,
Book of Revelation. Yeah.
yeah, like throne room type imagery
Right.
and,
Right.
you know, yeah, behold the Son of God.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So that's my media experience for the last
I wanted to ask
4.
you, I don't think that you mentioned how Rivers and Robots turned into just Jonathan Ogden. Did you say that? Or
I
did you?
don't exactly know how that happened. Um, I think they just I don't think it was anything bad. I think they just kind of
No.
wanted to do their own projects.
Well, here's what
Um,
I read. After we talked about them last time, when we talked about Magnify, I did the Wikipedia and I looked them up because I think I said on the in the episode, I was like, there's no definitive about us. And then right after I said that, I was like, why didn't I just go to their Wikipedia? But I didn't do that. I just because I had been thinking I've been doing research more specifically on Magnify. And so then I did look them up. Set Sail, because we talked about Set Sail as the kind of the precursor to Magnify. Well, Set Sail was their record label. And so their record label was putting out Rivers and Robots. And then they changed their mission after, I think it probably was 2020 that changed their mission. They probably couldn't meet together as much. And Jonathan was putting out more stuff solo. And then they realized they wanted to go into more ministry, right?
yeah,
And so, which is similarly happened with us, where we wanted to make Media Moses.
yeah,
Um, and so then Set Sail, their record label, got turned into Magnify because they wanted to go into turning their artwork into missions, kind of some sort of a ministry. And so I think after 2020, Jonathan being started doing his own independent stuff from that. And then Magnify, I think, came after that, right after that. And then they started doing more ministry stuff, like I said. But you could see what that ministry stuff really looks like when you look at the Magnify Tokyo project. That's kind of what that project entails. Going into a community to where you can meet other artists and try to help them build projects, like build artistic work. And so they
yeah,
ended up making an album and they ended up making a magazine from Magnify Tokyo. And that's
yeah,
probably going to depend on the kind of artists that they most commingle with, right? So if they come to Florida, which it appears that they've come to Florida, I just haven't gotten an update from them on how they're doing. And I subscribe to their thing and everything. So hopefully we'll get an update from them soon at Magnify. But when they do, we'll find out what kind of projects maybe that they're thinking of. Maybe God is leading them to make, and maybe they'll even have some get-togethers here in Florida somewhere. So I hope to go over there and say hi and bless
That would be
them
awesome.
and whatever I can do. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, really edifying stuff um and a lot of it like I recommend listening to it if you're ever feeling down. It will get your mind on God for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But so what media experiences have you been having this week,
Oh,
John Croft?
yes. I think when we discovered Jonathan Ogden, I think we also discovered John Thurlow and a lot
Yeah.
of other kind of indie style praise
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah,
There's
and
good too. He's
John
got
Mark
more of a piano.
Pantana.
John Mark Pantana, yeah. A lot of other great indie Christian stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, as it comes to me, well, we saw on New Year's Eve, was it New Year's Eve?
Yeah, it was.
We saw Homestead, the movie,
Hmm.
and I saw personally Bonhoeffer
Hmm.
finally, which I'd really wanted to see. I just kept not being able to see it, and then kind of forgot about it when December rolled around.
Yeah.
Um, and so I finally saw that, and wanted to talk also about feminist film, but we can talk about that later. We can talk about that in a minute. I guess I'll comment on Bonhoeffer first because we can both comment on Homestead.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Bonhoeffer was quite impressive. I was really amazed. Like, first of all, the acting. The acting was quite good. You don't tend to see this good of acting in like a faith-based uh
Mm.
genre. And I think they really cared too about the the subject. Like the filmmakers really cared about Bonhoeffer's life, I think, and what he was really about. I think
So
they did
what was it about? What is the movie? What's the movie about?
well. It is about Bonhoeffer's life, but because they start out with his childhood in the beginning, and then later on I mean, spoiler alert, he doesn't make it out. I mean, that's kind of his life is that the Nazis kill him. But he is a Lutheran minister who was, born in Germany, he's full on German, but throughout his life, he's seeking God through ministry, and he just keeps discovering that his nation is kind of being lost as it comes to the church. So that he's finding a disconnect in his church. And but they seem to couch a lot of his change in perspective of ministry in his experience in America. So he comes to America, and I think he discovers kind of like um a great church in New York, and discovers also racism in America. And so because this great church I think a Black Baptist church. And so he loves the music. He plays piano. So this is one way he relates, right? Is through jazz and through and also just seeing a different kind of church community. And so he gets a lot of joy out of this, and I think learns a lot. And he seems to describe that as real community and real like what churches should really be doing. And it but the big difference that I was seeing between his church in Germany and the church in America, as it comes to what the film showed, is that just the one in America was more loving. Like that just seemed to me the big difference is that the one in America was just more loving. Um, I'm not sure if maybe I didn't get the message I was supposed to get from the film there, but I couldn't see like um I mean, unless they're talking about kind of some social justice, which had to do with the racial experience he had there, where one of his friends got um not attacked by a racist, but kind of attacked by a racist. And so he got to see that firsthand. And I think this, but to me, that's a matter of love, really. So, either you're loving your church members or you're not. And either you're experiencing love in the world and you're dealing with it properly as a Christian, which is to love your enemies, or you're not. So, you know, which I find is the real hypocrisy today when we talk about racism is that people are taught now to hate their enemies. So, not to love their enemies. And I don't believe that they would be preaching hating your enemies back then. Um, my guess is that they tried to relate it to today. And so they didn't show them necessarily loving their enemies in the film that much. But I think that they probably should have. But this is the central issue, isn't it, with Bonhoeffer, is that he isn't necessarily a love your enemies kind of guy, right? He's not necessarily, because the lesson that Bonhoeffer is really teaching is that sometimes you have to stand up against kind of terrible rulers, and that the church in Germany wasn't really doing this. And I think, when I first learned about Bonhoeffer, I was kind of like, well, surely as a German Christian, um, being that he's fairly well known, the big lesson would be how to keep the church holy and unspotted by the world in the midst of, terrible political upheaval. And then I learned a little bit more about Bonhoeffer and I realized it was more about him, his political involvement and whether he was going to be politically involved or not. And that he felt like he had to be eventually politically involved and even become an enemy combatant, so to speak, against Nazism. And then he made this a part of his faith. So I think because he's very well known and kind of famous in this way, I guess you could say he's some people would think of him as a conscientious objector, but I think that has more to do with like pacifism, right? And in a way, he was turning from a pacifist to a non-pacifist. So he's almost like challenging all pacifists to be like, should you be, maybe you shouldn't be pacifist. And so I take a lot of issue with this personally. And my belief is that God's kingdom is a spiritual kingdom and that we are supposed to love our enemies and that our way out of difficult political situations is not to sink to their level and engage in enemy combatant behavior or to become political. I really don't think that that's our solution. I don't think that we're supposed to follow in the footsteps of these political actors. Frankly, I think the problem with, I mean, this is in my view, and I think that some of his writings kind of bear this out, but I think because he was Bonhoeffer, I think some of the good things that he, I think, talked about was the fact that you live in a community and you have to protect and care for that community. And so he's right about that, right? But he looked at it like, well, then that means I have to defend my community. And it's true that you have to do that, but you also have to understand there's lots of different ways you can defend your community. You don't have
Yeah.
to defend it in this way or that way. You can defend it in other ways.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm not saying that I'm personally a pacifist at all, but what I am saying is that Jesus does teach you to love your enemies. He
Yeah.
does teach you to turn the other cheek. And he does teach you also that the gospel is the answer to a lot of these problems. It isn't some political solution, nor is it just civil authority, right? So the true problem with the German church, to me, was the fact that that's what they skimped on. They were skimping on the true gospel. They weren't
Mm.
skimping on some kind of political power or an ability to wield political power. Um, in fact, that's kind of the problem that they had, which is that they kept gaming the system politically, except they were on supposedly the wrong side, right? And so, like, the question then when you're in politics is well, what's the right side? What's the wrong side? You don't want to be on the wrong side. Well, the right side is not about politics as a Christian. It's about Christian. It's about Christ. It's about being with Christ. I really do love that the story really seemed to accurately tell his story and really made him kind of a man who is struggling with his faith and struggling with his expression of true Christianity. Um, I'm sure the man was a Christian. Like I'm not saying he was like a bad person, he wasn't a Christian, etc. I'm just saying that I actually think preaching the gospel is is better than political involvement. I think it's better. I think it's more effective. I think
Yeah.
it's actually I think it actually would have stopped Hitler.
Mm.
So I'm talking about a more effective tool,
Yeah.
right? And so loving your neighbor and the gospel, it's obvious about obviously about loving the Jews. You can't not make it about loving the Jews.
Yeah.
Obviously you do. Jesus was
Mm.
a Jew. That was a lot of the problem in Germany at the time is that they were whitewashing the scripture, changing the scripture, and saying that Jesus wasn't a Jew somehow. They were just falsifying all this stuff. And they were trying to get rid of the Jewishness of the gospel. Obviously, you can't do that as a Christian, but that has nothing to do with politics. Nothing. So, you all you do is care about the truth. That's it. You just care
Yeah.
about the truth. You care about the truth of the gospel. You love your neighbors. You love, including the Jews and Germans and English and everybody else. You love everybody else, you know? And so, like, this message is revolutionary. It cuts across national boundaries and national identity and sex and race and all these things, which, of course, part of that is the fact that we only have one race. It's the human race. That kind of solves that problem, doesn't it? We're
Mhm.
actually just one race, you know? And Nazism and communism, a lot of that, the belief system there comes from evolution, which is that we're all different races. They're
Mm.
actually racists. The
Mhm.
evolutionary science leads you to racism because that's what it believes in, because it believes that we came from different kinds of apes or whatever around the world. It's silly. There's no evidence for it whatsoever. But that's the theory, right? And they're going on this theory, and this theory leads men to do terrible things. We've seen it in history. But now that we have more science on this, by the way, and we're able to trace people's lineage better, they're able to see that we're all related. But people are just ignoring this data. They're just ignoring it, you know? There's places you can go on YouTube now. I think it's called something Genesis something. And they talk about this. This is strong science they're doing.
Answers in Genesis.
Answers in Genesis. Yes, they're one of these groups. And they talk about that matter very clearly. This just
Yeah.
flies in the face of all this evolutionary data.
Yeah.
You can't fudge that stuff when you actually look into it. You can't fudge all your DNA and all that stuff. It's ridiculous. So all of us all came from Adam and Eve, and but what are you going to see before that in the genealogical data is actually coming from Noah, right? Because that's Bible says we were in a worldwide flood. So we actually came from Noah, right? And then before Noah, it was Adam. So this is not that weird if you look at the
Yeah.
data. So we're all in the same race. And we have no right to just treat each other this badly anyway, even if we were of different races. We have no right to do that. So
So,
this is not political. This is all just the gospel. This is all just what the Bible teaches us.
so I didn't see Bonhoeffer, but I saw the trailer.
Hmm.
And in the trailer, they appear to have Bonhoeffer looking at some old film or some film of the victims of concentration camps.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the most like heartbreaking images I've ever seen. Like it's really heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
I think the the Bonhoeffer story or part of the story, the film anyways, is that he becomes involved in a plot to assassinate Hitler.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, which is interesting because he also happens to be a pastor, a Christian pastor.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it seems this is how Angel's marketing it. Like he's a pastor and he's a hitman.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I find that mildly disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do
I
as well. Yeah, I think that I think as pastors, we're called to be men of peace. I'm not saying I'm a pastor. I'm just saying as a Christian, I feel the same calling. But I think that as pastors, we're called to be men of peace. We're called to have a higher calling, right? Than just some kind of physical struggle. No, this is a spiritual struggle. And
yeah.
this is far more powerful than some physical struggle. So, why put down your strong weapons for some small piddly tool? That just doesn't make sense to me. I'm not saying that you should never, like, I'm not saying, like, let's say a pastor should never go to war or something or sign up. If World War II comes along and you're an American pastor or something, I mean, maybe if you're a young pastor, especially, think about doing that because they're going to need men on the battlefront. But like, and as a pastor, you probably could be in a more administrative place and could rally people to do the right thing in war. But like, I am saying also though that don't reduce all these things to the physical. War is not just a physical matter. And if you look into Nazism, it was a very dark spiritual matter. They did not just hate Jews, they hated God. Similarly to Karl Marx, right? They hated Christianity. Um, and they wanted to reduce everything to the physical. They
Mhm.
really they believed that they were greater, like, biologically than other people, and this was part of their belief system about nationalism and things like this. It was about their race. And so when you reduce everything to these terms, people become meat. They're no longer something to be dignified,
Mhm.
right? To be respected and loved and appreciated. They're things to just use like a cog in a wheel. We're just going to use you. This is what communism and fascism does to people. It reduces everybody to, are you going to be paid by the state and taken care of by the state? Because why? Because you're just a physical thing. You really shouldn't have a choice to act outside the state. You really shouldn't have a choice to become a spiritual Christian or whatever. No, you're just a resource to be kind of like ground up into meat for the state to use. So in their mind, the higher calling, right, is that the state does something great and forms this utopia, right? And so individual people get left behind, and the human being is not really respected as the image of God. Last week we talked about the image of God, right?
Mhm.
And how important it is to respect the living image of God and treat each other with love and kindness. Wash Christ's feet, and that really means you're taking care of the body of Christ, right? The church. And so communism and fascism just reduces people to numbers. Why didn't they put numbers on the Jews' arms? There, that's another way to dehumanize people. They could have just as easily put their name on there. Well, what's your name? That's not hard. No, it was purposeful to reduce them to something subhuman.
Yeah.
This is what propaganda does too, because propaganda is a message that you're supposed to agree with. And if you don't agree with it, then there's something wrong with you. It's coercive by nature, right? People, they don't want you to think for yourself or disagree. If
Yeah.
you disagree, then there's something wrong with you. So, right. And you have to be shuttled off and put off in another group so that you can be put into like a car and sent to Auschwitz. I mean, I mean, sure, maybe you might be lucky and survive it, but you might not be. And who judges that? But the cold, hard state. There's no like, they think that they're their own God and they can do this to people. So they dehumanize the image of God, right? So I mean, goodness. Bonhoeffer's a great film though. Even though I disagree with Bonhoeffer's theology, and I think he should have stayed away from Germany, frankly, at that point. Um, there's other ways you could fight. He could have become an English, you know, combatant or something against. He had contacts in America and England. He could have been accomplished even more. Like the point is, I don't know that, and I just think that the philosophy that is taught about him is not the greatest in my view. I don't think it's the most useful or spirit-filled message. I think honestly, you can't be held responsible for the entire German uh, church. Bonhoeffer can't be responsible for the entire German church. He should, and he was acting like he was,
Mm.
and he acted like he had to be really punished for that. And I think that's why he stayed in Germany. He felt he bore some responsibility for all of that, and I think he was wrong about that. I think you have to absolve yourself to some degree for the things that the collective did without your approval. And
Mm.
he was among a handful of preachers who actually did preach against it.
Yeah.
So, at that point, it's like, what can you do when people aren't listening to you? They're just going to throw you in prison. And then how can you preach and help then when you're in prison? I mean, you can. I'm not saying that this might not have been God's actual purpose for Bonhoeffer to do what he did. Um, but I can't know that, right? But personally, I don't think the philosophy that he's preaching, though, as a result of that, is a good idea. I don't I don't think the solution is political or again being reducing it to physical war. I don't think that's a good idea. And part of Marxism is to reduce everything to a dialectic in which you have just the right and the left wing, and they just battle it out. And if you don't join the right or the left wing, then you're out of the picture, and your voice is useless. And and this is all just a big lie. Of course, your voice is meaningful. God gave you your voice. It's not only within the halls of politics that you have power. It's silly. It stops believing in the power of the spiritual and the power of God. Instead, it believes in the halls of political solutions instead, which is kind of a false religion when you think about it. So the church can't has to stop believing in the false religion. It has to put all that aside and say, I don't care about political power. Instead, what I care if I can have influence in political power, it's to convert others away from that system, right? To convert others so that they're not harming people through that unfair system. And that's my belief. I mean, obviously there's a lot of nuance here and it depends on a lot of things. And I'm not whatsoever saying Christians shouldn't be in the government whatsoever. In fact, I mean, almost the opposite, you know. But when you're talking about the kind of warfare that they're talking about and the dehumanizing effects of that, that's terrible. Anyway, now that I've depressed everybody, depressing myself over here. I did like Bonhoeffer though. It's a great film and it's definitely worth watching. Definitely worth watching. It's on the Angel app right now. So, but we saw Homestead in theaters on New Year's Eve.
Yeah,
And what did you think, Rebecca?
I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, it was just well made, really well
Mhm.
made, and characters were engaging, nice, everything was set up really nicely to draw you in.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, Obviously a drama, um, a lot of good characters. I thought it was all good. The writing, the directing, I thought it was well done. At the end of the movie, I kind of wanted to know more about this family.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess we've probably already talked about this on the show, but just a quick synopsis of Homestead is that there's some kind of nuclear disaster and you follow a couple of different families and they all seem to have this solution in their mind that they're going to go to this guy. We don't really know how they know him, but they're
Right.
going to go to this guy in Colorado. They're going to drive to his house because he's the guy you want to be with
Yeah.
at the end of the world. So,
Like he's made it known before all this happened. Like we're
yeah,
preppers, we're prepared for things.
yeah,
They kind of are a rich family. They kind of have a
out
big house. They'll have a
beautiful
lot of
house.
land. They probably have like 100 acres or something. I don't know, a lot of land. And they seem people seem to know them either through family or friends.
Yeah,
And now that this thing has gone down, it's like this is the first person they think of,
yeah,
well, which kind
exactly.
of makes sense.
Yeah, and I think in some ways we have like a lot of people have thought of that before. A lot of people have been like,
Yeah,
"Oh, well, when this, like people say when the zombie apocalypse comes, I want to be with that guy or I'm going to go
right.
to that guy's house or
Yeah,
um so I think that's, I was, you could follow that line of thinking even though they don't explain a lot. I didn't really feel like they needed to and
true.
so some people get in the gates and some people don't. And that's a
Hmm.
little tense um, and stressful, but um, it was just good. Good characters. Yeah. Obviously seemed to be a Christian family because they were talking about prayer a
Well,
lot.
the wife seems to
Yeah.
mostly be a Christian, and also they
Yeah.
seem to have raised their daughter to be a Christian. But
Right.
it's kind of ambiguous whether the husband really is a
Yeah.
believer. He almost acts like he just believes in her, not in
Yeah.
God.
Okay.
So I that felt a little bit, um, which we'll talk about feminism soon, but
Yeah.
that felt to have a little bit of a feminist vibe.
Yeah. And and yeah, a lot of homeschool references, which was
Yeah,
fun. So it seems like the daughter of the family is homeschooled and a lot of the families that visit them. So that was kind of neat. Yeah, I don't have too much else to say about it other than that, but
yeah.
it was definitely worth watching.
It is very decent. I mean,
Yeah,
when you take a show, right, and you re-edit it, I'm assuming they re-edited it for this project for with Angel Studios. Because Angel's doing something, by the way, that's very unique from anybody else in the world. They are making shows that can also be shown in theaters and movies that can also be shows. And you
yeah,
just don't see this anywhere else. They did this, they started with The Chosen, And The Chosen to this day now, every year they come out with a new season, they also release it in theaters. So
Right.
this is just unheard of. It's quite like refreshing because it's kind of a new idea, and it also seems kind of difficult because it's like, but they seem to be accomplishing it. They seem to be pulling it off because this is essentially the pilot of the show, and it's constructed like a movie.
Yeah.
It's good. It doesn't lose you. The plot doesn't lose you with the tone.
No.
It's not, it doesn't get boring in any way. The visuals are good. They look cinematic. Um, like the color correction, definitely cinematic.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not saying it was like perfect whatsoever. There was definitely some issues. Like we just talked about, some of the character development might seem a little bit paint by numbers, very tropish. Just the whole concept, right? That they are a rich family and now everyone knows about them and wants to get in through the gates after some apocalypse is very it's kind of like the scenario you always imagine,
Hmm.
whether you're thinking of like the zombie apocalypse like The Walking Dead or something, or whether you're imagining some other kind of apocalyptic scenario, or World War situation or what have you. Um, and some disaster movie. It follows a lot of disaster movie tropes. We talked a lot about, not a lot, but we've talked a little bit in the past about other kind of genre tropes and other shows such as Jericho. I think I mentioned Jericho, which I really liked. We've talked about The Walking Dead, compared it to these. And they're like The Road was another one, was pretty good. Um, there's a lot of comparisons you could make. Probably The Walking Dead is the closest thing to it, except this is not gory at all. I mean, I think that even kids could watch it for the
Yeah.
most part. Not really young kids, but kind of teenager kids could watch it. They have a little bit of a love story between older teenagers, um, and kind of like young love type themes there.
And they did that really well, I thought. I
They
really
did.
liked
It was
how they did
classy.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But some of the relationships are kind of paint by numbers. You mentioned how some people couldn't get into the gates and other people could.
Hmm.
Well, the important thing to note there is that the reason they can't climb over the fence or whatever is because they hired, hired security, right? And so the owner of of the house knew this security guy, this military guy, and he has a lot of people working under him. And so automatically, as soon as this happens, he like shows up at the gate and it's like, well, come on in. And so they kind of take over security for this facility, this home, and that shows the immediate tension of the show, which is now you have two big dogs here in charge of this house, and the other is the legit owner, and the first is the legit owner, and the other, the new guy, is the guy with the guns. So that's the question: is does the guy with the guns get power hungry and just take over, right? Or is the legit owner going to stay in power? It's going to depend on if he makes good decisions, right? And is he going to be smart about this thing? I don't want to reveal the ending, but there were some things that we talked about, like that I was disappointed by. I guess like what I could say about that is it felt like they hit the easy button on a little bit of that and made it look easy, like an easy solution in the end. And it goes with our discussion here with feminist movies. It has a little bit of that trope in there. I think the mistake with this is that it makes it look like these kinds of problems can be solved easily if you just show compassion. Like compassion is the solve all. It's like, but not just compassion, right? Who's God kind of serves as a deus ex machina to just kind of come and save people in the end. And this is often a mistake, I think, in stories. It is kind of hitting the easy button, and it lacks kind of believability, to I think most people. I think for Christians, Christians can accept a lot of it because Jesus is kind of our deus ex machina, and he does actually kind of come and save us at the end of the day. But the reason that's believable is because he's God, right? That's why it's believable. But like we also have stories in the Bible where, like Job, where you're like, well, why is this happening to me? And so Christians also have this understanding that God doesn't just always save you from your problem. Like he actually wants you to learn how to get out of your situation quite often, and to show patience, to show the fruits of the spirit, right? To be wise, to not judge others too harshly, to be gracious. And so there's a lot of kind of things we have to exhibit in our understanding of God's wisdom and how we treat other people. It is important how you treat other people. Um so this Deus Ex Machina situation kind of rubbed me the wrong way in a little bit, but I'm not I don't think that the show is feminist. Like I really don't, even though it kind of has a little bit of that trope and it kind of hits the easy button. Um it's I think there was good intentions on it.
Yeah, the movie, I thought the movie had some really good male leadership and um women, wives trusting their husbands in a time where you really need to work together as a unit.
Yeah.
You can't be like having spats and things. But I mean it wasn't perfect. Like there were certainly couples that were going back and forth on stuff, but mostly I
Yeah.
felt like it was a pretty positive representation of,
Yeah, it's not like they didn't have spats, right? They
yeah,
actually had quite a lot of spats, but these were not like deal breaker situations.
right.
These were
Yeah.
not situations where people were like, "Wow, well, I'm just gonna leave," or whatever. Or
Yeah.
you've really done it this time. Like it doesn't it, they're fresh, there's a clash, right? But then one person tends to um let it go, right?
Yeah.
And
It felt like, I don't like this, but I trust you. That
yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah.
right, right. Which I think is generally more realistic because
Hmm.
Hollywood tends to really melodrama this up in many ways. And it's kind of like women giving birth on film. It's like always crazy. It's like always like, it's the worst thing ever. Ladies, if you've done this, this is not always true. And if guys have been in that room, this is not always true, right?
Just doesn't
It's
look the way they
nonsense.
portray it.
I mean, sure, I'm not saying that it's not true for some women, but Hollywood acts like it's for every single woman that ever gives birth. It's just like, and likewise with these relationships, right? Hollywood often acts like, you know, marriages are just meant to fail. Like it's just like, that like you generally don't see Hollywood being like, marriage is great,
Yeah.
and there was some difficult things here in the sense that, like even though you said that there were some good strong men, it's true that there were some good strong men. But we've also now seen two
The show.
episodes from the
Yeah.
show, and not to give spoilers or anything, but like I don't see any positive male figures here, frankly. I see them mostly, I see mostly the women kind of coming in and solving things.
Mm.
Um, and I'm not saying this is certainly not Hollywood level feminism, right? It's a little toned down, but it's still like the ladies, man, they got it together and they're working, they're trying to do good things. And the guys just seem like depressed, angry, can't communicate, can't solve things.
Hmm.
Um, And that can be true. I'm not saying that's not true, but it's like it just seems like always this is happening, you know.
Yeah.
You know, this is also going to be part of the genre, you know, because it's like, well, this is the situation where everything's obviously going to be going wrong because otherwise there'd be nothing happening in the show. So, I mean, obviously this is
Yeah.
we understand what this show is. You know, it is gonna things are gonna go wrong. But you remember that one scene, the guy is like trying to fix the solar panel, and then the lady
Oh,
just
I
comes and
see.
like screws the thing, and then she's like, "It's done." She hands him the screwdriver.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Uh now if you do remember, and I think you do, she is an expert, right? Well, I don't know if expert, but like she was in the military and she did do this work.
Yeah. In the movie,
Right. It shows in the movie. Yeah.
they make that comment that she had some experience with solar panels.
Yes.
And so, but it's if it's just standalone watching the episode, you're like, what?
Yeah, because literally it's like she just does a screwdriver and it's finished. It's like
Yeah.
you couldn't have done that.
I
You know? They
saw one
really
of
did it make it look silly like the way they did that, but uh
yeah.
generally these things are not fixed with just like screwing something in. That's just not how these things work. She'd
Yeah.
probably like even as an expert, she'd probably have to look at it for like a good 15 minutes and be like, okay, because I mean, electrical devices, there's so many connections within electrical devices. I mean, things could go wrong in many different places.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to act like an expert. I'm just going to say that they made it look kind of silly when they
It
did it
was a
in the
bit
scene.
too easy of a
Yeah,
fix.
yes, to another easy button thing, hitting the easy button there.
So
But
you
like
said you saw 2 episodes?
I did. So you
Okay.
you only saw one?
I only saw that first one and I was kind of like, but I figured it would get better, you know.
Yeah. It's still a good show.
Yeah, it is good, and it's not really, I wouldn't say it's that different from the movie, except for the pacing. You know, so a
Yes.
movie, you've got that certain kind of pacing that's leading you along
Mm-hmm.
to the end, to a conclusion, but a show, it's like slow
Got to
burn.
draw it out more. Yeah. Yeah.
Drama, drama, drama.
Yeah. So yeah, but I did enjoy it. I was impressed with the show and the movie, you know, the pilot. And it's also worth seeing. But this subject can bring us into the main topic, which I'm calling feminist Hollywood films. And so the reason I want to talk about this is I have an article I've been writing, I don't know, for like a week or something. And it's about how Angel Studios is starting to produce more feminist style films. And, you know, when they sold Cabrini on International Women's Day and they kept kind of like pointing that out, I was like, this sounds like Hollywood to me.
hmm
This doesn't sound like a faith-based studio, you know? Um, and it just sounded like immediately like boom, little
Yeah.
light goes up. I'm like, huh, this is a and like an identitarian kind of like or feminist message. Cabrini isn't really a feminist story, you know, but they turned it into one. You know, people they didn't. It's you know what's funny? You study Cabrini a little bit, which I did a little bit. They talked about how it was amazing that she did these things because she was frail. She wasn't just, you know,
Mm.
she was sickly. Did they focus on that through the show? No.
Mm.
I'm not saying that they didn't include it. It was a thing that they included, but they by the end of the movie they acted like it was a woman's like struggle she was fighting,
Yeah.
and that's just not true.
Yeah.
What, you don't think Catholics have great female missionaries all around the world? Of course they do. You don't think they have great, like um Mother Teresa? Is this like a new thing for the Catholic? No, of course it's not. So and then they have these lines in Cabrini that's like, "You would have made a great man." I'm like, "What? What does that have to do with anything?" The fact is she was struggling with her health the whole time and she did great things despite her health. And so, and I'm sure that some of these things, um, sure, you could always say she had some extra difficulty because she was also a woman. I'm not going to say she didn't, but like, how is this a feminist story? It just doesn't, that kind of, I don't know. I think that kind of does a dishonor to her actual story. It turns it into some kind of political thing, you know, which has nothing to do with that. But because this is a hot button issue today, right? Because this is easy to market International Women's Day, it's easy to market in these terms. Um, it's just like low-hanging fruit for them, right? And because so much of Christian media today is feminist, right? I mean, what's probably the most popular faith-based style film you can make today is a rom-com about a girl who's a girl boss and a guy who's kind of half incompetent. He's got to get his life together, and she's going to teach him how to do that. This is the kind of film that's being made a lot today on like Pure Flix and faith-based film studios. A lot of these kinds of films are being made, you know? Um, and so one of the things I wanted to point out was that Christian media tends to be behind the times. It tends to be kind of the throwaway subjects that Hollywood doesn't care to talk about anymore. They've been talking about it already. I want to just share an article here from Bazaar magazine. Of course, people have known Bazaar magazine for a long time. They are one of the hundreds of female centric magazines we have in the world. Of course, we have some male oriented magazines. This is not about how there's no male oriented magazines, but this is just one of the, designer women's magazines. I want you to look at the history that Hollywood has given us of feminist films. Some of these I wouldn't really consider feminist. Babadook is not really a feminist film. Um, uh, Belle's not necessarily feminist. Some of these are very feminist.
Oh, is this meant to be a list of feminist movies?
Yes, these are the
Okay.
feminist movies that women have been celebrating for 75 or so years.
Okay.
So it's a long history in Hollywood of producing feminist films. 75 films here
Hmm.
that have been made to spread an agenda, to talk about an agenda um, of women's issues. Now, we love women. We, I think, like there's somebody, Legally Blonde. It's just such a great film. Nothing wrong with many of these films, fun films, right? Some of them are terrible. This is a good film, so I've heard. I don't think that's feminist at all. Barbie, of course. So many of these films are extremely political, um, and disturbing. A lot of sexual content. Um, Probably the first one on here was 1940. But there was ones before that. These are just mentioning the best. The film starts in 1940, His Girl Friday, where Howard Hawks has this kind of like um, female versus male theme. It's a comedy though. You know what I mean? Like it's supposed to be funny about how she wants to be her own girl boss. Or at least she wants to do things her own way. And her husband is actually kind of her boss. And so it's cute in that way, right?
It's very cute. It's a
Yeah.
great movie.
I wouldn't even necessarily think of it as super feminist because it's supposed to be funny, right? Not supposed to be taken that seriously. But also, there's nothing wrong with women being journalists. Goodness gracious. Like, who cares if a woman is a journalist? Nobody cares.
I think sometimes there's this perspective that if the main character is a female,
Right.
or most of the main characters are female, then that automatically makes it feminist or something. I don't really know.
There's another story about a woman being a journalist. She's not a journalist, but she basically does journalism to blow the whistle on this company. Like, who has a problem with women doing that? Nobody. How's that feminist? It's not. That was a disturbing film. It's a very trans film. Um, all about Eve. That's more about ageism. That's not feminism. So some of these, it's true that they're not really feminist movies. Nobody has a problem with women doing great things in the world. We love that. I mean, America's the least against women's rights country in the world. We want everybody. I mean, why would we think Little Women is a well, you can't have a bunch of sisters in a family? It's ridiculous. Silly. Of course you can. Can't have a female artist. Oh my goodness, a female artist. Shocking. I mean, let's not forget that we've had female directors in film since the beginning of film. Female directors since the beginning. Nobody's keeping women from being directors. Nobody. Nobody cares. Direct a great film. Oh my goodness. There are women in the Catholic Church that are doing fun things. Shocking. Truly shocking. 9 to 5. I remember that movie. The guy they're getting revenge against is a bigot. Other guys don't like bigots either. This is has nothing to do with feminism. Clueless. That's a fun movie. I mean, that's true that Clueless had some bad themes because basically you're teaching girls that they should care about work and being your own girl boss at a young age instead of caring about other things that I think generally young women care about. Uh, oh, Whale Rider. I would say this is definitely a feminist movie. Girls aren't allowed to be chiefs. Well, yeah, because a chief is a guy, like a king. But that's not acceptable to her, an 11-year-old powerhouse who believes it's her destiny to ride whales and lead her tribe. How many other people in her tribe think that they should be the leader? Well, she's the only one. She's the only one that believes things. Absurd. Why should she be the leader? Just because she believes? That's just not how you become a leader. But just by believing something, that's not a good message. But so yeah, that's definitely a feminist type story because it's all about belief, right? It's not about necessarily about, you know, something that's logical and makes sense. This is about God. This is not about the fact that she's a woman. God inspired her to do what she did. Like Wonder Woman, right? She's got divine powers of some sort. It's not the fact that she's a woman. Um, A league of their own. Oh my goodness, women in sports. Who would think it? I mean, we should all stop women from doing sports. It's absurd, silly. So many feminist movies are just. Do we mind if women go across country on a trek like in the movie Wild? Does anybody care? No, nobody cares. Similarly to Moana, nobody. Why would we care and try to stop people from doing that? Obviously, for Moana, she's a kid. Her parents are gonna be like, "Be careful, sweetie." There's so many feminist movies. The premise is just flawed. It's like, what does this have to do with anything? Of course, women can do great things. I love Alien. That's just a great movie. And of course, Sigourney Weaver is amazing in it. She's just amazing. But probably the most feminist idea is Set It Off. There's probably other movies. Look at this. Queen Latifah and these other ladies uh, play a group of friends who find themselves at the mercy of intersectional violence, turning to robbing banks as their only way of dealing. Now that's feminism. I don't know what to do. I'm going to rob banks. That's my solution. I'm going to like make it hard for everybody else because I don't like something. Um, let's hear it for the girls, they say. Yeah, that's another terrible movie. So, this inspiring list of movies, so inspiring that Hollywood's been doing it for 75 years. Why would we now, why would we now in Angel Studios do the same thing? Let's just do the same thing everybody's been doing. Angel has made a reputation for themselves as an anti-Hollywood studio. And they were sued a few years back. This is how they became Angel. They were VidAngel at the time. And what did they do? What were they doing at VidAngel? They were basically using technology that was cleaning up these terrible Hollywood films, removing the bad language from them, removing sex scenes from these movies, removing things, maybe gore or something like that. I mean, you could literally remove all the F words, all the bad F words from a movie. Like you could be that specific. And so they were applying this technology to do that, kind of like censoring it, essentially, censoring or modifying these Hollywood films. Well, they get sued, right? Because supposedly they are affecting the copyright. Like this is a copyright issue. This is,
Yeah.
Hollywood owns these films. This is their art. Can't just, destroy their art and deface it. Okay. Well, they won. Hollywood won. Hollywood defeated VidAngel. VidAngel had to pay millions of dollars. And this is why they're no longer VidAngel. They left the company. But before they did, they said to their fans, they said, would you rather we made another company and did something similar, or would you rather we made our own films that were better than Hollywood films? Because we're tired of Hollywood.
Mm.
And what happened? They gave them their fans gave them $5 million. Bam. Here's $5 million to make your own studio. Right? Now the company's called Angel Studios after their angel investors that gave them millions of dollars. What, to make the same kind of films they make in Hollywood? No, of course not. It's absurd. So, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm not pro Hollywood. I'm not pro whatever Hollywood does. Least of all these kind of feminist movies that are bad for families, they're bad for the church, they're bad for, men and women all around the world. This is kind of a message that's kind of caustic and acidic and terrible for families and like women, it makes women see men as these terrible people, who are sitting in their basement playing video games all the time. And it makes men look at these women and say, none of these women are going to give me the time of day. They think I'm a scumbag. How can I live? How can I ever hope to have a family? So this is really kind of depressing. Feminism brings about a lot of depression and mental issues, both for men and women. Because why? Because we're men and women. We need each other, and it's how families are made. The very fabric of humanity is about families and having children. So your tribe can survive. It's
Yeah.
just absurd to think that women can go around going, I don't need a man. And men can go around being like, oh, these crazy women are crazy. Both of these are just absurd and crazy ideas. Like, obviously, we have a natural love of each other and desire of each other. Why are we against that? It doesn't make sense. However, what does make sense is that political people love to divide and conquer their enemies. They love to do that. That's just what they do.
Divide, yeah.
Divide and conquer. So not every society is going to be experiencing this phenomenon of feminism. And it's the ones that are being attacked, right? That are suffering through it. And if you listen to the call of these political actors, you're buying into your own destruction and the destruction of your community. Don't do that. That's not a good idea. Like, you're not going to live a happier life. And think of the damage it does to your community when you buy into these philosophies that don't make any rational sense. And I haven't even talked about what the Bible says about feminism. I haven't even talked about that at all. The most based anti-feminist person, Jesus himself. Why do I know this? Because when he talked about marriage, he said, remember, God made Adam and made Eve. You think that's transgenderism? No, it's the opposite. He's clearly delineating two sexes, and he's clearly saying God made it. You think he's saying we should just defy that? No, of course not. And he indicated Adam as the head, right? And he indicated Eve as the person that we all get born from now. So we're supposed to respect each other. He's telling us already to respect each other, care about each other, respect fully. Respect is like understanding the purpose of something and respecting it for what it does, using your discernment to understand how things are, not how you want them to be, how you imagine they can be. No, how God made it to be. That's Jesus. So the church has really failed to teach this message. I don't see it teaching this message. It's actually a very simple message. Men are different than women. We have a different calling than women, right? We're the head of the home, the head of the church. But head doesn't mean we get to be in charge of everything. No, it just means we have to obey him as the head. He's the model we have to follow. And how does Christ teach about this? Oh, if you want to be leader of all, you have to be servant of all. Does that mean I'm going to just do what my kids tell me because I'm their servant? No, that's not what that means. That's about having a servant attitude, right? And that's about me helping them and me caring for them. But it doesn't mean I also don't tell them what to do. I do. So we're here to share God, and we do that through the truth. We can't share God through false lies. That's not how it works. So you still have to preach the gospel. You still have to read from the word. You still have to read about Genesis, right? To read about what happened to us, the foolishness of Adam and Eve. how they were so foolish. What's the biggest foolishness of Adam? Did he do things too hard? Was he misogynistic? No, he was weak. That's the failure. And that's how feminism gains power. Weak men. Like, yes, ma'am. Happy wife, happy life. That's weakness, right? That's stuff Adam says. Haven't we learned from that? It's like the first lesson of all of Scripture. Don't let your wife rule the family. That's the number one rule. Number one. Things Adam's supposed to learn. I don't see that happening in the church. Do you? Do you see people in the church going, men are supposed to rule the family everywhere? Do you see that in your church? No, but it's the number one rule in the Bible that we're supposed to learn from all of this. I, am I crazy? Like, how is it people haven't learned from Adam and Eve? How is it men aren't teaching the truth of how to not be like Adam? Right? Silly. So silly. Um, so I'm gonna just suggest Angel Studios. Uh maybe don't make a movie like Cabrini or Rule Breakers, this other movie that's coming out. Hey, guess what? There's another movie coming out on International Women's Day this year. Who's putting it out? Angel Studios. And it's called Rule Breakers. It's a bunch of girls who want to break rules. Really important that we teach this lesson to girls. They should just break rules. No, it's not good messaging, guys. That's my point. I'm not saying the particular story, because the particular story, when you look at it, it's Afghanistan. Goodness gracious. Terrible rights for women there, obviously. So I'm not saying that the movie is probably that's is not worth watching. I'm not saying the movie and the story is probably terrible, but the messaging doesn't look that good right off the bat. It looks like another Hollywood film, right? Like Cabrini. And again, I'm not saying Cabrini was a totally feminist film. I'm saying that they marketed it that way. Why did they do that? It's such easy, low-hanging fruit, you know? When you're part of a marketing department, oh, this is so easy. We got it in the bag. Just release it on International Women's Day. We'll get people in the theaters. This is playing into this political cause, which is not good for society, as I've stated. How about if we have a movie that comes out on some kind of day that's good for marriage, good for families, right? We need a holiday like that, right? Men and women together, working together.
It's called the Stay Married Day.
International Stay Married Day. That's what we're
Or
going to
like,
call it.
yeah.
And it has this novel idea, respect for
Hmm.
men and women in their respective places that Jesus made for us. Mind blowing. Why does it have to be one as opposed to, like, why not both? Why does it have to be a divisive thing, right? Because we all know that feminism, sure, it seemed good like 100 years ago. Women should be able to vote. Okay, sounds good, right? I'll give you that. Sounds good. What is it now? Men stink. What does that have to do with equal rights? I mean, feminists now treat men so badly that if they actually got equal rights, they'd be treated badly too. Does this make any logical sense? No, that's not equal rights. That's women rule and men are terrible. Like what? How is this good? It's never this, and this has been since I was a kid. So feminism has been ruling the roost for way too long. And Hollywood trends don't tend to last this long if it's just a trend. No, it's an agenda that's being pushed like propaganda. Ugh, how boring. Like it's so inauthentic. I mean, do women really think that they can beat up men twice their size in a feminist action movie? It's absurd.
Well, the constant message of the world is to be, unsatisfied with who you are and where you are, and to always be striving for something that appears to be better or that appears to be owed to you in some way and was taken. And
Right,
so
right.
offense is nurtured and
Yes.
being a like, I hate to use a word like victim, but a kind of mentality of
Right.
like poor me is kind of nurtured.
Yeah.
Um, and this kind of discomfort in your own skin, like in who you are, um,
Mm,
and
yeah.
to always be searching for the real you, to not just be, not just exist or just be who you are. Like this is just who I am,
Right.
but to find out the real you and what that is and who that is, and um, and in Christ we are just we're completed by him. We're just fully like satisfied by him, and we don't need some kind of validation
No,
from
no,
another
we don't.
source to feel good about who we are. We're like, well, God himself decided that it was worth it to die a horrible death so
Woo!
that we could be with him
Amen.
in
Amen.
heaven for eternity. So if he thinks that about me when I was a sinner, this was even
Yep.
before I had any idea of doing something good in my life. He saw that he wanted to do that for me while I was yet a sinner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, then what else really matters? Like what other opinion really matters? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I love how
so
you
that,
said all this because you were talking about identity
yeah.
and how the world robs your identity from you and then gives you this fake identity that you're supposed to fight and be angry about and viciously battle others for because you feel wronged and slighted. And so you have this false kind of like outrage, this false righteousness, self-righteousness and outrage that that gives you the strength and courage to continue fighting these political wars, these political causes and become activists, right?
Mm.
That takes a lot of energy. And
You've been drafted.
generally the world uses your hate and anger to do that, to give you that kind of energy. It doesn't use love, right? Hate and anger has a lot of intense energy for a good few years, and then it like tosses you out and throws you away. Love doesn't do that. Love is a never-ending, lifelong struggle to do good, but it's like a marathon, right? You don't have to do it today. You know you're too happy to do that, right? You're simply longing to do good in the way God wants you to do good. And this is because you're satisfied with your identity in Christ. You're satisfied with what God gives you, right? Because not everybody gets a family, not everybody finds their loved one. But as you said, right, what Christ does is he satisfies, he fulfills that longing in you that you have in you for a partner in many ways, right? And
Mhm.
so he satisfies your need there if you do feel unsatisfied And the things he wants you to have, he gives you a desire for. And then by seeking those things, you won't be unsatisfied because those are things he'll give to you, right? So God actually gives you desires for the things that you can have, and he takes away desires for things you can't have or should not seek, right? And so you're not like unsatisfyingly like looking for some change in some kind of activist, this artificial political cause that you're trying to create in the world, where you're just kind of harming people and not realizing the great harm you're doing in the world, which is totally feminism. That's what feminism does, I think. I think that's its primary cause. Um, I think remember how we talked about this really cool Eastern Orthodox chick, what's her name? Rachel Wilson. And she did this book on feminism, and I haven't read the book, but I heard one of her interviews where she basically goes through the book in many ways, and I was just blown away by it. I was like, oh my goodness, feminism is not a recent development whatsoever. It's been around a long time, and it relies on unhappy women. So if they can make you unhappy, this just makes more converts, right? And so their primary thing is to make you unhappy, make you unsatisfied. And I think this is also where trans the trans movement comes from, because you were talking about not even not even having a good sense of identity, right? And so if you don't have a good sense of identity at all, and it reaches to the depths, this, depths of like existential depths, then that identity crisis can become even worse than just how do I have a family or a life or a good political situation or what have you. No, it becomes about you, like literally the skin you live in. You feel that disjointed from the universe. You don't even feel like yourself in your own skin. This is how damaging these philosophies are to the human being, to the human psyche. They're like taking you out of the skin God put you in, you know. And I think the more we listen to these philosophies, the more damaging it is to our culture, to our churches. Sorry, but I don't think feminism is the future. I think people are going to end up being too unhappy. And I'll be frank, I think women actually want a good man to lead them, because like the truth is men need God to lead us. And I know what it feels like to be like, I don't know what to do, but you know what? I'll listen to him and it'll make me happier. I'm familiar with this. Like hands off, I can let it go, right? And let him do it. And that's the experience women can have with their husbands. It's a similar, it's not the same, but it's a similar experience where you can be like, I don't have to worry about this, and I'm not
Mhm.
in charge of this. And that's very freeing. It just takes a burden off of you. You don't have to be the one to come up with the decision about that. You don't have to be the one where your will is on the line and your decision is on the line, and you have to make these decisions. And then other people, you have to be the one to make these decisions for these other people. And God wants to free us from the kind of worry we can exhibit in life, where we're so concerned about every single thing. And Jesus has told us in so many different ways, don't worry about these little things. God has got it covered for you, right? And this is the same for families. He wants wives to not worry about these things. Your husband has got it covered. That's his job. I've already inspired him with the right answer. Just listen to what he's saying. How is this a bad thing? Rachel Wilson, remember I talked about Rachel Wilson. She actually, you know what she talked about? When women got the right to vote, women did not want the right to vote. They don't teach that in schools.
Mhm.
And why would women not want the right to vote? You know what she said? The history showed that when they asked women, they didn't want to worry about it. They didn't want to have the responsibility. They were too happy as wives to care about all the political nonsense too on top of it. Why would they want to care about all that? Goodness, what a life. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. I wouldn't want to worry about it either, frankly. Politics is so much nonsense. But like the truth is, these women were happier in their state before the right to vote. You believe that? It's crazy, but it makes sense because this is kind of how authority and being a leader works. Sure, you get the right to make decisions, but now you got to worry about a lot of other stuff now. Did I really make the right choice? This is on my shoulders now, right? So I have to care about things, right? To listen to God, to make good decisions. You think God's always telling me clear as day what to do? No, he's not doing that. He gives me enough knowledge sometimes to make my own decision. And then I'm like, well, I don't feel bad about it. I feel pretty good about it. I can make that, I can be responsible for this. You get enough history with making decisions, or you're just not as worried about it anymore. Like, well, this is not as hard of a decision as some things, I've done this kind of thing before. It's not a huge deal. But like, why even worry? If you could be not even worry about it, just wipe your hands of it, that'd be great. I know some people are a little bit more choleric, right? We like those four designations of characters, don't we? The way they used to judge it: choleric, phlegmatic, sanguine, and melancholic. Those just make so much more sense to me than the newfangled thing they do, which I don't know, it doesn't even make that much sense to me. But like the cholerics like to kind of come in and make decisions from the outside and kind of be in charge a little bit. They enjoy that.
Yeah.
That's my daughter. We love her so much, but it's like, honey, you're only 11. It's like that one movie synopsis we read with the whale rider. I'm like, there's an 11-year-old powerhouse. I'm like, no, no, you're not.
I'm like, that's my
You're not a
daughter,
power. You're not a
an
powerhouse.
11-year-old powerhouse.
That's right. You need to be loved, sweetie. It's okay. I love whales too. It's cool. It doesn't mean you can be chief. I'll just say no. No on that one. But I love your ambition. That's great. You know? And this is often what we have to tell people. We have to tell this to boys too. Like, calm down, buddy. You don't know what you're doing. It's okay. You know? But like, you know, this is true for kids. And to God, all of us are like his kids. And we're not too smart compared to God. We're just not, you know, that's fine. We need to get comfortable with that. And I think a lot of the feminists need to just dial it back a little bit. You need people. You need men. If you're stuck in an elevator, you need a man to come fix that elevator. I do. Right. So it's, we can love each other and care about each other. And I don't think Angel Studios should be catering to this kind of philosophy. It doesn't amplify light, in my view. It's not light. It's not the truth. Feminism is not the truth. So that's not light, you know? And we what we really need is anti-feminist messages of love, caring for each other, right? The way Christ cares for the church, right? That's the kind of love we really need to be talking about.
Yeah. Are you gonna give back your angel t-shirt?
Heck no. I still love what they're doing. And they do have still have like we just talked about Bonhoeffer and Homestead.
Yeah.
Homestead had a little bit of that in there, but it's not too bad. It's pretty good.
Well, what about David too? That's an amazing,
Oh,
amazing show. Hopefully a movie soon.
that could end up being better than Sound of Freedom.
Mm.
Like, and Sound of Freedom, by the way, not one little bit of feminism in that movie. Goodness gracious. What a great movie. We need
Yeah.
more of those kinds of films. I'm sure David is also going to be pretty great.
Yeah.
Um, but he does mistreat women though, doesn't he, David?
Well,
This movie will not. This is young Dave. This is David as a kid. He's going to be taking on Goliath, no doubt. I don't think there's any doubt of that. Even though they haven't given us much hints, it's obviously him as a kid. So I think it's working up. I bet you this movie, this animated film, David. By the way, thanks for bringing up David. What a great hope for this coming year. I think it's going to be coming later in 2025 this year. November, I think, 2025. This could be the biggest animated film in history. This film just looks amazing. I bet it's working up to all the times when he was a kid and he was taking care of his sheep, these moments where he's being a shepherd, right? A kid shepherd, learning to care for his sheep. And and then I think Samuel's gonna anoint him. And
yeah.
it's gonna blow everyone's mind. And you're gonna be like, wow, this kid deserves it. It's so great. And then he's gonna take on Goliath. I think that's gonna be the movie. Like
Mm.
Goliath, and that's it. Just end it with that.
Yeah.
That leaves you with possibility for future films. But why would you do that with such a cute film? Focus on his youth,
Yeah.
But what a great start! Like a kid just kills a giant. Like what a great story is David, man.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
wait. Can't wait.
I'm excited.
Me too. So ending on David, that's good because I don't want to leave a bad taste in your mouth, guys, about Angel. I think that they're doing a great job. And I just think that they don't need to market these films this way. And they don't need films that are just like the Hollywood films we've been having for the last 75 years. Like, this is a trend that's not the greatest messaging. Hollywood needs to change. So, and this is one of the ways it has to change. It's to stop giving this kind of fake political messaging. So, all right. Well, that's what we got for today.
Where can
Oh,
people find out more about you, Jon Croft?
thank you for saying that. But I almost forgot
Oh,
my friend, Ryder the Omniscient. We just put out our interview with Ryder the Omniscient out
that's right.
today. It's a really great interview. I hope you guys catch it on my channel.
Yeah.
He's a great dude, and he's a fellow Christian filmmaker. And we talk about Christian arts and Christian film and how we can make better faith-based film. And we also talk a little bit about feminism there too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So you asked me where people can find me. People can find me on MediaMoses.com. You can find me here on YouTube, Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft. You can find me on X at John Edward Croft and on Instagram at John Edward Croft and at the Media Moses on X. So, how about you, Rebecca? Where can people find you?
You can find me on Substack. at Rebecca Croft, and you can also find me on YouTube at Rebecca Loves Jesus, and also Facebook, Rebecca Loves Jesus.
That's right. Gotta mention the fascist book. All right, love you guys, and stand up for the culture. And we'll see you guys next week.